So welcome to today's session, Fake News and Evaluating Sources. My name is Tara Starbird. I'm a librarian as part of the Digital Literacy Training Division of the library. So we do a lot of different training things throughout the year on research, referencing, formatting your PhD, your documents. We do all kinds of researchy type things, and fake news and evaluating sources is another aspect that we cover. And so we'll get into that today, and hopefully we'll get through a few things. So before I begin, I always like to acknowledge the traditional people on whose lands I am coming to you from today, and that is the Ngunnawal people. And I know people are all over the world and are coming from other traditional lands, but I just think it's important to pay respect to the elders, past, present, and future, and pay respect to the land that I'm on today. So I just want to begin with that. So today's session, we'll try to, as briefly as we can, cover how to find credible information for your research. So that's how to identify scholarly and peer-reviewed materials, how to determine when research looks legit but really isn't, evaluating sources using an evaluative test. So if you're uncertain about something, there is an actual framework. You can just put it through really quickly to test out whether you should be using it. And we'll go over that today. And then we'll do a little bit on fake news, misinformation, and general lie spreading online. So how to combat it and how to talk to your family members and friends about it. That's something I do touch on. Okay. So this is a question a lot of students come to. How do I know which information is good? You know, there's so much information out there these days, and particularly if you have a family member who is into a conspiracy theory or many, you're aware that they will bring you news articles and documents to prove something. Then how do you actually determine what is legitimate and what isn't? And so we're going to go through that today. So evaluating sources, this is part of your research process. So when you're doing any assignment, you're going to be finding sources and, doing all that writing that you do and that analyzing, but evaluating the sources is just as important. So you're going to be thinking about the sources you've found, making sure that what they're saying is backed up in a number of places, not just in this one place. And you're going to reflect on whether that information source is the most appropriate for your assignment. So is it pitched at the right level? Does it really have a lot of references and citations in it? Is it widely cited itself? And there are ways that you can find out how cited a piece of material is, and that's really important. So if you're not finding what you need, you can change around your keywords and refine your searches and find some more materials. So if you start finding things that don't seem right for your assignment, don't use them anyway. Make sure you look for other sources. So we've got the TRAAP test. This is what we the evaluative framework that we put onto information sources that we find. So I'm just going to pop up my PDF of this. So it's a much bigger one. So we call it the TRAAP test. I think traditionally was called the CRAAP test, but it was seen as not polite enough. So they've changed it to the TRAAP test. And it's just really a handy acronym that you can use to assess an information source. So not all information sources are created equal. So this is a set of questions you can ask. So the TRAAP bit is just to help make you think along those lines. So when I talk about timeliness, that's where you just do a quick look at an article and see when was the information published. Does the age of the information affect the accuracy? So if you're talking about technology and education and they're talking about the typewriter, it's probably not relevant enough. Look for the most recent version you can find, because often it will refute things, it might address other things. And if it is a web thing, I say make sure the links are functional. Then we have relevance. And that's, are you the intended audience? So you might find a good information source, but it might be pitched for a much more broad audience, a more general audience. And that's not really what you're looking for in your assignments. You want something that's targeting scholarly materials. So make sure it is a scholarly audience that it's pitched to. Even if it's a really great newspaper article, a great article in National Geographic, it needs to be pitched at an academic level or you shouldn't be sourcing it. So have you looked at a variety of sources that say a similar thing and chosen this one because it's of a higher quality? So it's really important to look at that this source is agreed upon, is showing a bit of a consensus in the area. And I know a lot of people will want to quote a source if they find it and it says something very different to everything else, but you need to make sure that that's backed up elsewhere. So yeah, would you be comfortable citing this source? And that's something that can make especially undergrads really nervous, is what if I'm quoting something that's, you know, like a popular source, like a magazine or something my lecturer is going to be upset about. So yeah, try to think about, does this seem like something you would quote in an assignment? Then there's authority, and that's probably the easiest one to investigate. So where did the author come from? Is the publisher, author, sponsor identified? So if this is if you're in, you know, engineering, as I think one person said, and this is a big study on bridges, who is the one who actually did that study? Was it a university? Was it a corporate body? So you want to look at that and see where it's coming from. If they're selling a product, you probably want to be a bit more cautious about taking that information at face value. And another really easy way is just to see, has it been cited elsewhere? So it's all fine and well to publish some research, but there are ways that you can find out how often that research has been cited. Now, you do want to be mindful that it hasn't been cited by all the people saying that it's a horrible bit of research and should be discredited, but you might want to follow the paper trail with some research and see where it's cited. So yes, and you know, can you verify the credentials of someone? So then we have accuracies, that's the 2 A's in TRAAP, like TRAAP, basically. And that's accuracy. So if you find information in there, do you find a general consensus in other research that you're finding? Does it have sufficient evidence to back it up? And that's a really nice big citation list, lots of reference to other work in the field. Has it been peer reviewed? So that's a really important one. Has anyone sort of heard that before, saying, make sure your work, the work that you cite, is peer reviewed? So we get a lot of lectures that. Feel free to pop that in the chat. It's an excuse for me to have tea while I'm working. So lecturers do harp on a lot about peer review. So that's just another way that you can sort of use to determine if a source is of a higher quality. And this is a particular pet peeve of mine. If there are multiple spelling and grammatical errors, it's probably dodgy. So definitely give that one a miss. And the last one is purpose. And this is a little bit like authority when we talk about the author and the publisher, but you want to think about why the information was created. So was it to inform, provide facts? Was it to sell or persuade you of something? So is there evidence of, you know, religious, political, institutional, or even personal bias in there? And that's something we need to be really mindful of these days, because there are a lot of people with agendas. And probably the best example is the Lancet paper linking autism to vaccinations. Now, this was an incredibly small study of 6 children with autism, and the person who wrote this study held the patent for a specific type of vaccine. So his research said that the traditional vaccine, the one he didn't have the patent for, was what caused autism, and that his patent one, which he didn't mention in the research, was what wouldn't cause autism. So this research is still put out there by people who are in the anti-vax movement, but this research has been completely debunked because of his vested interest. He owned the stock in the different vaccine that would have made him a substantial profit if the other vaccine was dumped. So it is always really good to follow the financial backing of the person and follow the institute that has done the research. So that's sort of the way you would apply that test. And when I do the video for this thing, I will have the links to where you can get this information in evaluating sources and where you can download this next one, which is a quick way to analyze your sources, where you just ask some questions of each one and put a little yay or nay on when you want to use this source. Now, ideally, you would run the TRAAP test on every source you use in an assignment, but realistically, you're not going to have time. So I would sort of reserve this test for when you have something and you're just not certain if you should be quoting it. And you'll probably get that gut instinct going, listen, I like this, but it's a bit left of field. I'm not sure how well received this is. Run through a few of these questions using your Google skills, and you'll probably have a better answer by the end of it. So I'll just pop up my PowerPoint again. Let's go. There we go. So I've got an example here of just a quick way you could assess the quality of a piece of research. So this one is by these many authors: David Markowitz, Rob Leha, Brian Perrone, Roy D.P., and Jeremy Bailenson. So it's immersive virtual reality field trips facilitate learning about climate change. So we've got this piece of research here. If you're thinking about whether or not this is a piece of research you should quote or shouldn't quote, where would you start to work out whether this is something worthwhile to put in your assignment? Sorry. So feel free to pop that in the chat. Well, thanks, Broderick. He's put the guide for the TRAAP test. The time it was published, Anya, excellent. So we're looking at this one. So that's 30th November 2018. So it's fairly relevant. What's something else we might be able to look up? How do we see if it's peer reviewed? Authors. Yes, we've got lots of authors here. I'll just grab my internet thing. So I'm going to go here, get my Windows here. So if I want to work out if the journal is peer reviewed, there is a really quick way you can do this on the ANU Library website. So that is where you go to U. It's hard for you to remember. It's something called Ulrich's Web. It's a German last name, I believe. There you go. Ulrich's Serials Directory. It keeps sort of changing names. But you can actually look up any journal and it will tell you whether it's peer reviewed and sort of its standing. And that's a really quick way to do that. Because a good one, Thomas says, where the authors are from. Yes, so just like you would do for a new love interest or an actor you've seen in a series that you really like, you Google them, 100% Google them. So I would put the journal in here to check that it's peer reviewed, but I have cyber-stalked David Markowitz. I picked him because he has a fairly unique name and I thought he'd be the easiest to find. There we go. Sorry, it's gonna go. So I found him very quickly on Twitter. So I can find his university website as well as his social media account. It's kind of hard for us to imagine, but researchers and lecturers are human beings who are on social media and are usually very active in that space if they are an up-and-coming researcher. So I was easily able to find David Markowitz's social media and the website for his university, confirming he is who he says he is and the papers that he has published. That was really simple. I could also go and search him on academic databases. So I can see how cited this article is and the different articles that he's written. So this tells me that I did this slide in 2020, so he hadn't published heaps in 2020, but in 2019, he had published quite a few articles. So I can see that he is, a new researcher who is, really at the start of his career. We can see that citation spread. So it gives you a good idea that he's publishing in this field and he's a regular publisher within his field. I can go further and I can actually track a specific article, which is pretty neat. So there's two sites, ResearchGate and I think it's ResearchNet. I've forgotten that one for a moment. But you can actually just put in any author or any article and it will track that article for you. So this will tell you how many citations it has, how many views it has, how many social media impressions it has. It can be a really good way to see that an article is legitimate. Now, you should also read the article fully if you're a bit suspicious of it, and you should read one or two articles it's been cited in to make sure that they're not simply refuting everything in that person's research, but it just gives you a good idea. And it is good to be to scrutinize a bit because there are there's a lot of research out there that is not scholarly and peer reviewed, but does a really good job of making it look that way. So another way to do that, let me just get into here. I'll go back to the library website again, which you will all know by heart once you have been studying here for a while. And one thing I can do when I do a search is I can actually limit that search by peer-reviewed and scholarly automatically in my search. So would someone like to give me a random topic to search? I do a lot of research training and a lot of EndNote training, so I have some very strange things if I click on this search bar, but please give me something different to have in my search bar. It doesn't need to be scholarly, it can be something you're interested in. Okay, development of military bases in Guam. That is very specific. Excellent. So you can see I've got some very odd ones here from previous lessons. So let's go. I'm going to go develop. There we go. I'm going to do a bit of a specific search so I know what I'm getting. You may have found something we don't have much research on because it's very niche. That being said, we have 5,000. So none of you have time to read 5,500 sources. And that's why I always very quickly, when I do any search, click full text online, unless I'm looking for a book. And this very important one, scholarly and peer review. If you just want peer review, you click this. Scholarly will also encompass textbooks and manuals, encyclopedias. So for today, I'm just going to click peer review. And that's brought us down to still a large number, but a much more manageable search yield. So that little quick thing on the side of ANU Super Search is going to save you a lot of time. Now, peer review is not perfect. I'll always say that. You know, it is a panel of experts. They have gone through and approved things, but you should always use your own discretion, your own inner Sherlock to decide if you should be investigating a source a bit further. And I know it is getting harder and harder. I often in a bigger version of this session, I will show an article on a type of geographical tracking of drop bears. Now, for those from Australia, can you put in the chat what a drop bear is? Scary, says Thomas. Lies, lies. So a drop bear is a joke, an Australian joke. If you go out in the bush, people say, watch out for the drop bears, they kill tourists. I'm a foreigner, so I was told by many people, watch out for drop bears. So this is a piece of research that you can find if you search research databases, because it is a comedy. It was published on April Fool's Day as a joke years ago, but if you search this in scholarly databases, you will find it. But if I then look at the authors who don't exist, or if I look at the reference list, which cites Mulder and Scully and Luke Skywalker, I can start to tell that it is a suspicious piece of research, but you do have to scrutinize it a little bit. It's a good question, Mira. So does Super Search search all the available databases ANU has access to? Yes and no. In theory, it's a big scrape of as much as possible, but we're talking sort of millions of items. So it can help if you are in a specific subject area to go into a database that is subject specific so that you don't miss things. And it also doesn't account for synonyms. So you might be searching your topic using specific keywords, but it may be described in research in a different set of keywords. So you're missing that, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So Super Search is the best case scenario for searching everything, but there are ways to be a bit more careful about it. So I'll just move back to my PowerPoint, because again, this is probably one of our shortest sessions. So yeah, ResearchGate is a really good place to check an article, and you'll see how well cited it is. If you're feeling bored, you can even search the Vice Chancellor, Brian Schmidt, and get his citation score, and they have a little index rating people's research. So it's interesting. You might even check out your own lecturers to see how published they are and how well cited their research is, that you'll get bonus points for knowing their research exists. Another quick thing I just want to note is domain names. It's super important to, if you're using online things, to look for the domain name. So a lot of people will quote things from online, especially if you're quoting policy documents, government documents, legal citations. But be mindful of the domain name, because you may be finding something that is an opinion, and that can be a very bad idea to quote in your assignments. So this little guide here will just have web addresses to look out for and web addresses that can be a bit more trusted. So I'll go into the quick bit about fake news now. I'm sure everyone's probably very aware of the situation. I call it the misinformation tsunami. And I can always, when I do this, come up with new newspaper articles. What's a newspaper anymore? News stories about this. So this is my little tsunami of misinformation. So vitamin C and coronavirus, not a vaccine, just a humble cure. so that wind turbines cause cancer. This is a former president. I don't know if you've heard of him. He used to head America. So coronavirus misinformation. Unfortunately, when you look up misinformation and fake news, about 90% of the content is Donald Trump. So it was tricky for me to find ones that didn't mention his misinformation. So fake news and public health and political stability. And YouTube working to try to take down the misinformation theories. So what do we do about it? It's a challenge, particularly I imagine almost everyone will know someone in their life who firmly believes in some of these things. So how do we combat it? There is a great guide here from Harvard University that has sort of government websites where you can put a news article through and they will scrutinize it. And I think those are really helpful if you get a family member sending you helpful, non-helpful things about coronavirus or whatever conspiracy theory they're into. It will sort of evaluate and do a fact check of that. And I think that's a really important tool to sort of demonstrate things instead of ending up in fights at the dinner table. So here's one of the infographics from the Harvard site, and it's very similar to the TRAAP test. It's kind of being a Sherlock Holmes yourself. So you consider the source, you investigate, where it came from, what is its mission, what's the contact information of this site.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you pop your sound off, Broderick? I can just hear a lot of background. That's all right. Read beyond. So sometimes a headline can sound more outrageous than the actual content. It's that clickbait phenomenon. So do look into a story beyond the headline and always check the author. Who are they? There is a journalist out there who is very anti-climate change, and he is subsidized by the oil companies. And so he's a very rich man from this. So it's good to look at the author. Where do they come from? Where's the money coming from? So my first degree was in journalism, and we always said that any story that you're looking at, you follow the money, and that's where the story is. And so in research is the same. You follow the money. If it is, the Australian Cancer Council funding cancer research, you can follow that money and say, well, yes, they are trying to research cancer. It's very different when it is, a body of any belief system that is funding research. You need to be mindful that they aren't having a persuasive element in that. So always look at the author and their background and who's funding them. Supporting sources. So if there is a document and it has sources, do the sources actually say what the document is saying? And that can very often not be the case, especially some of the early hydrochloroquine and bleach injecting ones. They had things that look like sources, but they linked to documents that mention nothing about them. Definitely check the date and check if it's a joke. April Fool's Day does produce a lot of newspaper articles, research articles that are for comedic purpose. And you want to make sure you're not accidentally quoting something that was sort of a joke going on at that magazine. And then consider your own biases. So we all have biases. We all have things that we probably shouldn't believe, but we do. And so if you're reading something and it's not confirming what you already know, also look at your own views. And ask the experts. So this is my plug for librarians. If you're at all unsure about something, you've done the TRAAP test, you're still uncertain, ask your lecturer, ask a librarian, ask someone who's a specialist. And that's the most important thing, I think, is to go to the experts and get a second opinion. Next steps, I'm looking at the time, we've got 4 minutes. Please visit our YouTube channel. I've actually created a short video called Evaluating Information Sources that goes through the TRAAP test. I animated it myself, so I'm very proud. While you're there, I hate to be all sleazy, but I love to plug our YouTube channel because we work really hard to make videos for students, and the more subscribers we get, the better, the more we can make videos. So we really enjoy making videos to help students all along the research journey. So please check out our website. And Broderick's put these in the chat links, but these links are here, and I will pop the slides up with the video so that that's all accessible in one package. And don't forget that we're here to support you as librarians for your research journey, your referencing, your formatting your documents. We have lots of training and lots of support available, so don't hesitate getting in touch. Thank you very much. Again, I'm Tara Starboard. This is Broderick. And we hope you enjoyed today's session. If you have any questions, I can answer them in the next few minutes, but I appreciate everyone's probably moving on to another session really quickly. But yes, thanks so much for coming, and we are available.